Next question. You can ignore this, that's from before. How can A times B times C times D be equal to 0? Think your own thoughts. Pause for a second, get your head around the problem, and then let's see. Okay, well, this can happen if A equals 0. That's at least one way it can happen, because if you multiply a string of numbers and one of them is 0, the result's going to be 0. So it could also happen if B equals 0, C equals 0, or D equals 0. Also, there's no other way. Okay? You can't multiply four numbers, none of which is 0, and get 0. Okay? Four, F-O-U-R, non-zero numbers. Can't multiply four non-zero numbers and get 0. And that should be pretty much common sense. Go ahead and try to think of four non-zero numbers that you could multiply to get 0. Any way you choose four non-zero numbers, you're going to get something besides 0. So how can this series of expressions equal 0? You should think this for yourself. Again, pause, but here we go. Okay, well, this is a number. Depending on what x is, this is going to be a number, and this is going to be a number, and this is going to be a number, and this is going to be a number. So we could just call that, it's like this is A, this is B, this is C, and this is D. And you multiply them together, you get 0. What are your conclusions? Well, either A has to be 0, B has to be 0, C or D has to be 0. So x squared equals 0, or x minus 5 equals 0, or 2x plus 4 equals 0. And I don't have room to write the fourth one out. I'll put that down here. Or 3x squared minus 7x plus 9 equals 0. Now, x squared equals 0, well, that's just an equation we can solve. We get x equals 0. Now, if you solve x squared equals something, you're going to get x equals plus or minus the square root of that something. But the square root of 0 is 0, and plus or minus in front of 0, it's still 0. Okay, x minus 5 equals 0. Very easy to solve that. You get x equals 5. 2x plus 4 equals 0. That's going to give you x equals negative 2. Or this. Now, how can this equal 0? Okay, can you solve this equation? You ought to stop for a second and see if you can solve this. Okay, well, how do we solve this? Never say never, but with the coefficient of 3 here and a 7 here, 9 here, it's unlikely that this is going to factor. So let's try the quadratic formula. And assume you know the quadratic formula. X equals minus negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 3 minus 4. Do the 4 times first, and the 3 and the 9, divided by 2 times 3. The problem we're going to have is this is negative. So we have a negative discriminant. So that 3x squared minus 7x plus 9 can't be 0. this leaves us with the conclusion that this is equal to 0 only for x equals 0, or this, and no other values of x.